You know that feeling? It is 6:30 in the morning. Your alarm has not even gone off yet, but your eyes are just open, staring at the ceiling. And before your feet even hit the floor, before you have had that first sip of coffee, you feel it. It is like a low-grade hum of anxiety in the back of your head. You grab your phone, you swipe open the banking app, and you do the math. Again, rent is due in 3 days. The grocery bill was higher than you thought it would be last week. And honestly, you are tired. You're working hard. You're doing everything the system told you to do. Get the grades, get the job, show up on time, but the needle just is not moving like you thought it would. It feels like you're walking up a down escalator. You're moving your legs. You are sweating. You are exhausted, but you are stuck in the same spot. We have all been there. That moment where you wonder, is this it? Is this as good as it gets? You look at the news, you see inflation, you see housing prices that make absolutely no sense, and it is easy to feel small. It is easy to feel like the game is rigged, and you are not given the rule book. My name is Mac, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, financial psychology, and why some people seem to effortlessly build wealth while others stay stuck in the same financial patterns for decades. And look, I do not say that to brag. Honestly, it is a bit of a curse. I will be at dinner with friends, laughing, having a good time, and in the back of my mind, I am deconstructing the economic forces that made the price of the steak go up $10 in the last year. I cannot turn it off. But over the years, that obsession, looking at the data, looking at history, and mostly looking at how people think about money, has shown me something. Something huge. Because right now, we are standing at the edge of a very specific moment in time. A window of opportunity that only opens maybe once every 20 or 30 years. Most people are going to sleep through it. They're going to keep watching the price of steak go up and complaining about it. But the people who see what is coming, the people who understand the shift that is happening right under our feet, they're the ones who are going to look back in 10 years and wonder why they were ever worried. So, in this video, I want to walk you through what I believe is the biggest wealth opportunity of the coming decade. It is not a stock pick. It is not a crypto coin. It is not some magic real estate strategy. It is a fundamental shift in how the world works. And if you position yourself correctly, it changes everything. We're going to get into the weeds. We're going to talk about psychology, and we're going to talk about some real, practical steps you can take. But first, you have to understand the context. To understand where we're going, we have to look at where we have been. For most of human history, wealth was tied to land. If you owned the land, you had the power. Then came the Industrial Revolution, and suddenly, wealth shifted to capital. If you owned the factory, the machines, the oil rigs, you were the king. And for the last 100 years or so, that has been the model. To build serious wealth, you needed massive capital. You needed millions of dollars to buy a factory or a skyscraper or a fleet of ships. If you were a normal person, let us say a smart, hardworking person in the 1970s, your path to wealth was narrow. You could save, sure, but the returns on your labor were capped. You could only work so many hours. You could only physically produce so much. You were selling your time for money, and your time is, unfortunately, finite. It is the worst business model in the world. Zero scalability. But then the internet happened, and that changed things a little. It lowered the barrier to entry. You could start a blog. You could sell a digital product. But even then, for a long time, the biggest winners were still the people with the massive server farms and the venture capital funding. The Googles, the Amazons. The little guy got some scraps, but the pie was still mostly owned by the giants. But right now, literally, today, we are crossing a threshold. We are moving into an era where the barrier to entry for high-level leverage has dropped to zero. And that sounds like hyperbole, but I mean it literally. In the past, leverage meant borrowing money from a bank. That is risky. If you borrow $1 million to buy a rental property and the market crashes, you are wiped out. But there's a new kind of leverage. A kind of leverage that does not require permission from a bank, does not require a rich uncle, and has zero downside risk if you understand how to use it. Naval Ravikant, this investor who talked a lot about this, calls it code and media. And honestly, that used to sound kind of intimidating. Code? I do not know how to code. I am not a computer scientist. Media? I'm not an actor or a filmmaker. But here is the twist. the thing that makes this the opportunity of the decade. We are witnessing the democratization of intelligence and creativity. And I'm not just talking about AI, though that is a massive piece of the puzzle. I'm talking about the entire ecosystem of tools that now allows one single person with 0 employees and 0 upfront capital to output the work of a 10-person team. Think about that. In 2010, to launch a global software company, you needed developers, designers, project managers, a server guy, a marketing team. You needed a burn rate of 50 grand a month. Today, you can do it from your laptop in your pajamas with tools that cost 20 bucks a month. So, the opportunity is not artificial intelligence in the abstract. The opportunity is the asymmetric bet on the individual. For the next decade, the highest return on investment is not going to be in the S&P 500. It is going to be in your own ability to acquire and use these new tools of leverage. The people who treat themselves as a business, even if they have a job, are the ones who are going to capture the wealth that is leaking out of the old, centralized systems. Let me break this down into a few specific points, because I want you to walk away with a clear picture of how this actually looks in practice. Point number 1, the death of the gatekeeper. You know what used to be the hardest part of making money? Getting someone to say yes. You wanted to write a book. You needed an agent to say yes and a publisher to say yes. You wanted to make a movie? You needed a studio to write you a check. You wanted to sell a product? You needed a retailer to put it on their shelf. The gatekeepers held all the power. They decided what got made, and more importantly, who got paid. But the walls have crumbled. I have a friend. Let's call him Sarah. Sarah is a graphic designer. A few years ago, she was working in an agency in New York. She was miserable. She had to commute 2 hours a day, sit in meetings she hated, and design logos for brands she did not care about. And for that, she got a salary that barely covered her rent. She wanted to leave, but she thought, where am I going to go? I need this job. Fast forward to last month. Sarah quit her job. She started building niche websites for local businesses using no-code tools that let you build software without writing a line of code, and she used AI to handle the copywriting and the initial design drafts. Then, she used social media to find clients directly. She has no boss. She has no commute. And because her overhead is almost 0, she keeps 90% of the revenue she generates. She went from earning a capped salary to making 3 times what she made at the agency, working half the hours. 10 years ago, Sarah could not have done that. She would have needed to hire a developer, a copywriter, and a salesperson. The math would not have worked. But today, the gatekeepers are gone. The market is a meritocracy. If you can solve a problem, you can get paid. You do not need a resume stamp. You do not need permission. That is a massive shift. Which brings me to point number 2. And this one is a bit more psychological, but I think it is actually more important. We are conditioned to think in terms of scarcity. There is only so much pie to go around. If he gets a slice, I get less. This is the mindset of the industrial age. It is a zero-sum game. If you want to win, someone else has to lose. But the digital world, the world of code and media and leverage, is a positive-sum game. This is where people get tripped up. They look at AI and they think, oh no, it is going to take my job. They see a tool that makes things easier, and they fear it because they have been taught that labor is how you create value. But the real value is not in the labor. The real value is in the judgment. The real value is in the ideas. Let me put it this way. If I give you a chainsaw, you can cut down a tree much faster than with an axe. Did the chainsaw steal your job? No, it made you more productive. But, and here's the key, you have to know how to use the chainsaw. You have to know which tree to cut down. This opportunity of the decade is about moving from being the laborer to being the architect. It is about using tools to multiply your output, not just doing the same thing faster. I was talking to a guy the other day, a copywriter. He was furious about ChatGPT. He said, Mac, this thing is writing articles for free. My career is over. And I asked him, are you just typing words, or are you crafting a strategy to persuade a human being? Because if you're just typing words, yeah, you're in trouble. A machine can do that. But if you're the person who understands the market, who understands the deep desires of the customer, who can look at the AI as output and say, no, that is not quite right. We need to tweak this tone to match the brand. Then you are indispensable. You have just leveled up. The opportunity here is to stop trying to compete with the machines on the things they are good at, rote tasks, data processing, and double down on the things that make us human. Creativity, empathy, strategy, taste. When you shift your mindset from how do I protect my job to how can I use these tools to build my own empire, everything changes. You stop feeling like a victim of technology and start feeling like a pilot. It is a scary transition, honestly. It requires you to let go of the identity of I am a worker and step into the identity of I am a creator. But that is where the wealth is. Okay, so we have established that the gatekeepers are gone and that the tools of leverage are now free or nearly free. But what does that actually look like for you? Maybe you are not Sarah the designer. Maybe you're an accountant or a teacher or you work in logistics. Here is the third big insight. The niche is the new norm. In the old economy, you wanted to be a generalist. You wanted to fit into a slot in a big corporate machine. I'm a marketing manager. That label meant something. It was safe. But in this new economy, the riches are in the niches. And I mean really niches. Because the internet allows you to find your specific tribe of people, no matter how small or scattered they are. Let's say you love, I do not know, antique typewriters. In 1985, if you loved antique typewriters, you were the weird guy alone in your basement. You could not make a living from it. The market in your town was not big enough. But today, you can start a YouTube channel, a newsletter, or an e-commerce store dedicated solely to typewriter restoration. You can find the 10,000 other people on Earth who are obsessed with the same thing. If you sell them a specialized cleaning kit or a course on how to fix the 1928 Remington, you have a business, a profitable one, because your audience is global, not local. The opportunity of the next decade is to take your specific combination of interests and skills, something that feels useless to a big corporation, and turn it into a personal monopoly. I was reading a story the other day about a woman who was a structural engineer, but she also loved knitting. On paper, those two things have nothing to do with each other. She could not find a job that combined them. So she started a blog analyzing the structural integrity of different knitting stitches. She applied engineering math to yarn. Sounds crazy, right? But she built a huge following. She wrote a book. She created a brand. No corporate HR department would have ever created that job description. It was too niche. But as an individual, she turned that weird intersection into a gold mine. You need to stop looking for a job that already exists. The wealth is going to the people who invent their own jobs. The people who say, I'm going to stand right here at the intersection of X and Y, and I'm going to own that territory. And this leads to the fourth point, which is the most practical one I'm going to give you in this whole video. Most people spend their lives building someone else is equity. You work for 40 hours a week at a company. You make the product better. You make the brand stronger. You make the shareholders richer. And what do you get? A paycheck. It stops the moment you stop working. That is linear income. The opportunity of the decade is to pivot to building digital equity. Digital equity is just assets you build online that work for you while you sleep. It could be an email list. It could be a YouTube channel. It could be a piece of software, a digital template, a course, a library of code. Here is the math that changed my life. If you spend 10 hours a week watching Netflix, that is 520 hours a year. Gone. Vaporized. But if you spend 10 hours a week for 1 year building a niche website or writing a newsletter or learning how to use AI to automate a service business, at the end of that year, you have an asset. You own it. You can sell it. It can generate passive income. And the best part about digital assets? They have zero marginal cost of reproduction. If you build a chair, you can sell it once. Then you have to build another chair. If you record a podcast episode, or write a blog post, or write a piece of software, you can sell it 1,000,000 times. You do the work once, and the upside is uncapped. That is the leverage. That is the opportunity. And look, I know what you are thinking. Mac, that sounds like a lot of work. And it is. In the beginning, it is the heavy lifting phase. You're pushing the boulder up the hill. But once you get to the top, once you have the systems in place, gravity takes over. I want to share a quick personal story here, just to illustrate how this plays out in real life. A few years ago, I used to be really into spreadsheets, like weirdly into them. I loved organizing data. My friends made fun of me. They call me boring. Mac, come to the bar, stop playing with Excel. But I realized that a lot of small businesses had terrible data. They were tracking their inventory on sticky notes. So I spent a weekend, literally just one weekend, building a better template for inventory tracking. I automated it using some simple scripts. It took me about 12 hours. I did not think much of it. I just posted it on a forum for shop owners. I said, hey, I made this. You can have it for $10. I woke up the next morning and I had made like for $100. While I was sleeping, that was a light bulb moment for me. I had invested 12 hours of my life, and I had created a tiny little digital product that solved a real problem. I sold that template for years. I eventually updated it, raised the price to $20, added a video tutorial. I did not get rich off that one template. I'm not driving a Ferrari because of an Excel sheet, but it taught me the principle. 12 hours of work, infinite potential for return. Compare that to 12 hours of working at a coffee shop, where you make minimum wage, and once you leave, you never see that money again. The beauty of this decade is that you do not have to be a tech genius to do that anymore. You can use AI to write the code for the template. You can use AI to write the sales copy. You just need the idea. You just need to be the person connecting the dots. So we have covered the tools, the psychology, the niche, and the assets. But there is one final piece of this puzzle, and it is the thing that stops most people from ever starting. It is the fear of looking foolish. The internet is a loud place. Everyone has an opinion. If you start a newsletter, or a YouTube channel, or a business, someone is going to say you are wrong. Someone is going to leave a mean comment. Someone is going to laugh at your first attempt. In the old world, privacy was the default. You kept your head down, you did your job, and nobody bothered you. It was safe. But in this new economy, obscurity is the enemy. You cannot build a connection with people if they do not know you exist. And I think that is why this wealth opportunity feels so scary. It is not just financial risk. It is ego risk. To capture the opportunity of a decade, you have to be willing to put yourself out there. You have to be willing to be bad at something in public, so you can eventually be good at it in private. I see so many people waiting for the perfect time. I will start my business when the economy is better. I will start my channel when I get a better camera. I will launch my product when I am 100% ready. Here is the hard truth. The perfect time never comes. And the economy? The economy is always changing. If you wait for stability, you'll be waiting forever. The people who win in the 2020s are the ones who ship. They're the ones who hit publish before they feel ready. They're the ones who are willing to make a mess and clean it up later. Action beats perfection every single time. Let's talk about what that looks like practically. If you're watching this and thinking, okay, Mac, I'm sold, but what do I do on Monday morning? Start with the one-person empire framework. You do not need to build Amazon. You just need 3 things. A specific problem. Find something that annoys people. Find something that is expensive, slow, or difficult that a solution. It could be a service you provide, a digital product, or even just curated information, an audience. A group of people who have that problem and know that you have the solution. That is it. That is the entire formula. If you're a nurse and you see that new graduates are struggling with a specific exam, you create a study guide. That is a product. If you are a mechanic and you see that people do not understand how to maintain their cars, you start a TikTok channel explaining it. That is an audience. If you're a programmer and you see that small businesses need simple websites, you offer to build them. That is a service. You do not need to quit your job tomorrow. In fact, I would advise against it. Keep the job. It funds your life. But use your evenings and weekends to build your equity. Treat your side project not as a hobby, but as a seed you are planting. I honestly believe we are living through the greatest transfer of power in history. Power is moving away from institutions and moving toward individuals. That sounds grand, but when you zoom in, it just looks like a guy named Sarah quitting her job, or a woman selling knitting engineering guides, or a dude selling an Excel template. It is millions of people realizing they do not need a boss. They do not need a permission slip. They just need a laptop and an internet connection and the guts to try. So, the big wealth opportunity of the decade, it is you. It is not in a stock tip. It is not in some secret loophole. It is in the space between your ears and the value you can create for others using these new, godlike tools we have access to. The gap between having a job and owning a business has never been narrower. The gap between an idea and revenue has never been smaller. Do not let this decade pass you by while you're staring at the ceiling at 6:30 a.m., worrying about the bills. The tools are there. The market is there. The only missing variable is you deciding to show up. Start small. Start today. Write down the problem you want to solve. Write down the weird thing you're obsessed with. And just begin. Because 10 years from now, you will either be glad you started, or you'll be wondering why you did not. I will see you in the next one. Keep building.